Hi there. I'm so excited to welcome you to the Arthritis Life podcast, where we share arthritis life stories and tips for thriving with autoimmune arthritis. My name is Cheryl Crow, and I am passionate about helping people navigate real life with arthritis beyond joint pain. I've been living with rheumatoid arthritis for 20 years, and I'm also a mom, occupational therapist, video creator, support group leader, and I created the Room to Thrive self-management program. I am so excited to help you live a more empowered life with arthritis. We're going to cover everything from kitchen life hacks to navigating the healthcare system to coping with friends who just don't get it. Seriously, no topic is going to be off limits on this podcast. My interviewees and I share our honest stories of how chronic illness affects our lives. This includes discussions about mental health, sex, shame, pregnancy, body image, advocacy, self-acceptance, and so much more. You'll hear stories from all ends of the spectrum, from a person who's living in medicated remission from psoriatic arthritis to somebody living with severe mobility restrictions and severe pain from rheumatoid arthritis. You'll hear how people manage their conditions in different ways, like medications, mindfulness, movement, social support, work accommodations, and so much more. You'll also hear from rheumatology experts who just get it. We'll dive deep into the science behind chronic pain and what's the latest evidence for lifestyle changes that can help you thrive with arthritis, including exercise, sleep, nutrition, stress reduction, and more. This is your chance to sit down and chat with a friend who's been there. Ready to figure out how to manage your arthritis life? Let's get started. Okay, I'm so excited today to be joined by Cristina Schaefer. Welcome, Christina.
Hi, Cheryl. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on. And can you just let the audience know, as a quick intro, where do you live and what is your relationship to arthritis?
I live in League City, Texas, which is a suburb of Houston, Texas, so about 30 minutes outside of Houston. And I have a long-term relationship with rheumatoid arthritis. I've been diagnosed with RA for about 20 years.
Nice. Yeah. And I just a little back when we first met each other, because you were you were hosting an episode of the Arthritis Foundation's Live Yes Arthritis podcast. And it was funny how many similarities we had. Because
Yeah.
I've now, this year, 2025, it's my 22-year anniversary of having rheumatoid arthritis. Yeah.
Yeah, we have very similar stories. It's kind of funny how that happens.
Yeah, well, yeah, we're going to talk a lot more about that. What happens when you start doing advocacy and volunteer work and making connections and how important that is on this episode. But I wanted to first share or start with your personal story because
Mhm.
so many people feel alone or lost when they first get diagnosed. And it's important to share our stories, as you know. So, when and how did you get diagnosed and what was your initial response to the diagnosis?
So at the time that I was diagnosed, again, it was about 20 years ago, I was going to school full time and working full time and, just living a normal young adult life. But I started experiencing massive swelling in my hands and wrists to the point where it looked almost like my fingers might pop if you touched them too hard. So massive swelling, but then also my knees and elbows were locking up. I would have kind of experienced the T-Rex arms that some people tend to have sometimes, or when I was sitting for a prolonged period of time and I'd go to stand, my knees they couldn't straighten out. I couldn't straighten my legs. My knees were so stiff. So this went on for a little while and I finally went to go see my primary care physician. And I tell people I kind of lucked out because sometimes people, they go through months, years, different doctors trying to get a diagnosis. But my primary care physician at the time, his daughter had just been diagnosed with lupus. So he was very familiar with lupus and rheumatoid arthritis. And he said, I think you might have something called rheumatoid arthritis. He was like, why don't you take this anti-inflammatory medicine for a little while and see if it helps at all. And if not, I'm going to refer you to a rheumatologist. And it really didn't help very much because it was so severe at the time. And so he ended up referring me to a rheumatologist who very promptly diagnosed me with RA. So that's a little bit about the diagnosis process and just kind of what happened there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so glad that you had that primary care doc that was so on top of it. And because, I'm sure some of you listening know that the earlier you get diagnosed and treated, the better your long-term prognosis, especially if it gets severe really quickly. Like in your case,
Mhm.
it sounded like it was in multiple joints, both sides of the body, really big amount of swelling. And I know it's funny that I like that description of the T-Rex arms. I actually hadn't heard that before, but I've totally felt that, especially with the knees sometimes when waking up.
Yeah.
So what were you studying at the time? Just out of curiosity.
I was going to college and I was studying communications at the time. Yeah. So, but I was doing that full time and working full time. So just putting so much stress on my body and, and my mind. And it was just, it really came out in the diagnosis, I think, just all the stress that I was under. Yeah.
Yeah. And, oftentimes when people get diagnosed or people ask me, what was your diagnosis like? They're expecting me to say I was really upset or sad about it. In my case, because I didn't know why I was suffering before, when I got that diagnosis and they told me that it had a name and there was a treatment for it and there was hope for relief, I actually felt relieved personally. I'm curious in your case, how did it feel when that rheumatologist gave you that confirmation that you do have this condition? If you have ever felt completely lost or utterly alone while trying to navigate real life with rheumatic disease, listen up. I am here for you. I created an educational program to help you go from overwhelmed to confident, supported, and connected in a matter of weeks. And it's called Room to Thrive. After earning a master's in occupational therapy and completing hundreds of hours of additional training, I created a step-by-step guide to help you truly thrive with rheumatic disease. This is the only program I know of that's designed to improve quality of life for people living with inflammatory, autoimmune forms of arthritis, like rheumatoid arthritis, psoriatic arthritis, ankylosing spondylitis, non-radiographic axial spondyloarthritis, Sjogren's disease, and more. During the self-paced lessons, you'll learn how to manage pain and fatigue, cope with stress, navigate relationships, and continue doing the things that matter to you and bring you joy. The goal is really to help you improve your quality of life and learn how to thrive with your rheumatic disease right now, rather than waiting for a distant day when it might be cured or healed. I really created the down-to-earth, practical, heartfelt resource I wish I had had when I was first diagnosed at age 20. If you want even more in-depth support, you can join the 12-week Room to Thrive virtual support group, where you'll be surrounded by people who actually get what you're going through, people who will provide the encouragement, validation, and support that you deserve. Each group is expertly moderated, so you don't have to worry about the kind of misinformation that spreads like wildfire in the free-for-all social media groups. If you're on the fence, don't just take my word for it. Here's what Katie had to say in March 2023. I was lost and overwhelmed with my RA diagnosis. It felt overwhelming to know what to read, what to do, how to spend my energy trying to research on the internet. Room to Thrive did that for me. It's been like getting a crash course in my diagnosis along with a community who gets it. To see all the details, including the dates for the next support groups, go to the link in the show notes or bit.ly/thrive room with a capital T and capital R. You can also just email me anytime at info@myarthritislife.net. And don't delay if you're interested, because each group is capped at 16 people or less in order to make a small, intimate group atmosphere. Thanks so much for your time, and I can't wait to get started with the next groups. And I can't wait for those of you who are interested in the self-paced option to go ahead and join that at any time. Bye-bye for now.
Yeah, when I don't know why, looking back on it, I don't know why when my primary care physician mentioned it, I didn't, I guess I didn't take it quite seriously. I thought, what is he, I've never even heard of what he just mentioned. What is he talking about? I'm fine. I was an invincible young adult at the time. And so I didn't, there was no acceptance with my primary care. But once I saw my rheumatologist and He explained what it was. He was an older man and I was his youngest patient. And so he really he was very careful in how he treated me. He was so kind, but also kind of did a little scared straight with me. He let me know the facts. And as you said, the disease was attacking my joints and my body so quickly and so aggressively. He told me, if you don't follow this treatment plan that I'm giving you, you're going to be in a wheelchair in just a few years, just because of how bad I was doing after just a few months since the initial symptoms started. So, but thankfully, I look back on it, I'm so thankful that he was strict with me because he really kind of woke me up and opened my eyes to it and made me realize I needed to kind of stop what I was doing and pay attention to my body. And, he really, again, helped me understand the severity of my disease. But yeah, as far as the emotional response though, I dealt with some pretty severe depression. At the time, I was acting out. Again, I was a young adult, so I think a lot of people in my life just thought, she's just learning and growing and figuring out life. But I knew internally that a lot of that depression and anger that I had at the time had to do with RA because I kind of felt that my life was just stopping and I was so young to have to just stop for this diagnosis. So yeah, it was a tough one for me. And again, I know I'm lucky that I got the answer so easily and quickly from my doctor, but it was also just, wait, what? This just happened. All of a sudden my hands hurt and now I have this diagnosis of this disease that has no cure. So it was very scary and really took a lot out of me for quite some time.
Well, that's completely understandable. I think, one thing I've learned through talking to so many people with arthritis is that there's everyone's story is different. Even if, let's say, both of us, got diagnosed around the same age, unless you were like a child prodigy. No, you're like at 12. No, sorry, I'm such a dork. But it's the response is going to be completely just depending. Yeah, I think in retrospect, I was blindly optimistic because the doctor did say it's very serious. And he actually used that same line on my mom because I wasn't really getting it. And my mom wasn't getting it either, the seriousness of it. Because she said, well, I only had one more year left in school. I was in my junior year, or I was in between my junior and senior year. So they were like, oh, you have to go on this medicine that's like thousands of dollars, like Enbrel at that time. And you have to refrigerate it. Like, why can't she just start in a year? And and is there something you could put her on until then? And they're like, if you don't do this now, she could be in a wheelchair in a year. And that's what really hit my mom. And then I just kind of trusted her and the doctor. I was like, okay, let's do this. But I was very blindly optimistic in a way. Sorry, this is like already going on a tangent, but I feel like sometimes optimism is a form of denial because I was like, okay, well, yes, it's a lifelong condition, but I'm just going to beat it. I'm going to be the one that like is victorious against it. And that's like a form of not accepting it, right? Because you're like, I'm actually not going to make it not a big deal, So I think both ways, long story short, both ways of responding, yours and mine, are completely valid and both have their own positives and negatives. You might look at my she was optimistic. Yay, that's great. And Christina was depressed. Boo, that's wrong. But then actually, no, because my blind optimism made me not even accept what was happening at all. So maybe you were actually, sorry, this is me going to tangent, but you were actually like really processing.
I was all in it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was processing every detail of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And you mentioned, you do not have to share anything you don't want to share, but you mentioned acting out. I'm curious what did that look like? Or
really just, I was angry with people in my life, family. Again, I was going to school full time and working full time, and I started just kind of slacking off, not caring as much. I wasn't, doing poorly. I didn't end up failing or getting fired or doing anything like that, but I was just, angry, and I took it out on the people around me a lot.
Yeah, no, that's what, in a weird way, I imagine that sometimes it's like there's this thing that's out of your control that happened to you. And it's so frustrating that you're like, well, why should I even try at anything? And because I had this thing of I took care of my body and it still revolted against me. So why didn't I just do drugs? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I was gonna get sick anyway. I didn't even do drugs.
Yeah.
That's
I could have been so much worse.
Yeah. If I was gonna get sick anyway, didn't need to be an athlete. And anyway, but
Right. Yeah.
that's totally different. But, I appreciate again you sharing this because I think a lot of times people like you and I who are in maybe more public or leadership positions, like in the chronic illness community, sometimes it's you kind of want to be like that quote unquote like the model patient or tell everyone I
Mhm.
was perfect and then you just need to be like me. But it's so important to be real, right?
Yeah. I mean, the reality was that I was diagnosed with an incurable illness that I'd never heard of. And it completely, you know, it was a jolt in my life, and it completely changed the entire course of my life and the things that I was passionate and that I am passionate about, and the things that, were became important to me, and the things that were no longer of any importance to me. It really just it changed everything because it had to change everything. I had to change, my focus and pay more attention to my health. I had to now worry about insurance. At the time, I could be under my parents' insurance only until 22. Now the law has changed and it's up to 26, but I was getting right to the age where I was no longer going to be covered, and I had to figure out, where am I going to get insurance? Right? I have it through my job. Is it good enough? Is it going to work for the medication that I need? Right? So, because like you said, those medications are thousands and thousands of dollars, and I was needing it every 6 weeks at the time. So how am I going to afford that if I don't have proper insurance? So my life had to change and my focus has had to change. And yeah, my rheumatologist may not agree. I think I'm a model patient today, but
Yeah.
at the time, I was just as confused and lost as the next person who's newly diagnosed with something that, they never expected to be diagnosed with.
100%. I think I really relate to what you're saying about insurance. I that stressed a lot about that, and that's something that not a lot of people talk about is that in the United States, like your health insurance is tied to either employment or marriage, right? You got if you're most people who are 21, 22 are not maybe married and don't have a full-time job that would
Mhm.
give you good benefits. So you alluded to the treatment journey. We are going to talk mostly about other stuff, but I think it is important to share, what are some of the highlights and lowlights of your whatever you want to share about your treatments, like in terms of, what you've tried, what's worked, what hasn't worked.
Yeah, so let me pause for just a second. Do you want me to name specific? Okay. So as far as my treatment journey, again, that initial diagnosis, I was in terrible pain. I couldn't move, and my doctor just started kind of giving me everything. So just like most patients, I immediately got put on methotrexate. I immediately got put on steroids. And then we started Remicade treatments, which most people are probably familiar with Remicade treatments. And we started, doing them in different intervals. First, it was 4 weeks, then it was 6 weeks. And then we were able to pull back on steroids and pull back on methotrexate. So after a few years, though, we found the right dosage and right length of time, that kind of that perfect cocktail, as some people say, that worked for me and got me moving. And I was able to really it was, I guess about 3 years into my diagnosis, and I was able to really live life without having to, think about my RA all day, every day, because the medication had me in a controlled state. So that was wonderful. And that's around the time, and I know we'll talk about it later, but that was around the time that I think I got over that initial hump, and now I feel better. And then I started volunteering. Kind of found the Arthritis Foundation after that. But so that was probably the first high point, was kind of reaching that controlled state. Now, probably the lowest low, aside from the initial diagnosis, was 10 days after one of the highest highs of my life, after my beautiful baby girl was born. 10 days after she was born, I woke up that morning and I went to feed her, and I experienced the most severe pain I'd ever felt in my life. My foot touched the ground, and it was like I felt a radiating pain from my toes all the way up my ankle, my knee, my hip, just my entire body. I just felt it all over. It was like I woke up and I had just been hit with a ton of bricks. And so that started what would be the worst flare of my life. And so I immediately, had to get back into my rheumatologist, and At that point, I was 10 days postpartum. I wasn't on any medication at the time. There were things that I could be on, during pregnancy, but I chose not to do that. So I was completely untreated. So had to get in. And this time it took even longer. It was almost 5 years before we found a medication that was able to help. And kind of going through that process, I don't think people realize how long that process of finding the right treatment plan takes, because it's not only just, all right, we're going to try this medication. We have to wait X amount of time, usually about 3 months, to see, did this actually help? And also, will the insurance now cover something else? So usually, it's about 3 months before you can even determine if something's working and if you can even move on to a different medication. So, kind of going down the list of so many, I honestly lost count of how many medications that we tried before we finally found something that was starting to work along that journey. And, again, it's a degenerative disease. So in that time, I'm getting worse. I'm feeling worse. I'm not able to show up at work and at home and in my personal life the way I want to. I was losing my hair. There's just so many things that you're going through during that time. So definitely a low. But once I kind of, again, found a medication that worked for me, I started feeling good again.
Yeah, I really wish I had known you at that time because, again, so similar.
Mhm.
So I know you have currently an 8-year-old and a 5-month-old, spoiler
Mhm.
alert, and I have an 11-year-old. And I had such a similar, it was like within 2 weeks after he was born. I had been in unmedicated remission during the latter half of the pregnancy and then was hoping to continue the unmedicated remission throughout breastfeeding and stuff like that. But so anyway, wait, and then I had to completely change all of my plans.
Plans.
Yeah,
Yes.
plans.
Yeah.
Plans. That could be the title of the episode. Plans, dot, dot, dot. LOL.
Yeah.
Laughing out loud. Plans and how they fail you. But even just knowing that, I think again, my blind optimism made me not even consider like the worst case is scenarios where,
Mhm.
what would I do? How would I
Mhm.
get help if things were so hard postpartum? So I'm glad you're bringing awareness to you can have a postpartum flare. That does happen.
Mhm.
Whether you're postpartum or not, that finding that right cocktail of medications and maybe the combination of medications and lifestyle variables, lifestyle interventions can take time and it can be a moving target. So sometimes I'm like, my first TNF inhibitor worked super great, put me into remission for 6 years. And then out of the blue, it felt like my body created antibodies to it, which I didn't even know could happen. So, I'm so sorry in your case, that roller coaster where you had the best day of your life, the baby was born, and then 10 days later,
Yeah.
it's just, I think in learning how to be a mom and learning how
Mhm.
to, you're like, I don't know if you were like this, but I was constantly like, well, is this just, am I fatigued because I'm sleep deprived from being a mom or, having a young child? Or is it my RA related fatigue? Is this hard because
Yeah.
of my joint pain or is it just hard because it's hard?
Mhm. Oh, yeah, I kind of stopped trying to figure out where's the line and just said, "You know what? I'm tired. And you know what? I need to lay down." I don't know if it's
Right.
it's mom, or even just like brain fog. I was like, I don't know where the line is between mom brain and RA brain fog. So I'm just gonna call it brain fog.
Yeah. Just call it my brain today. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
true. That actually comes up a lot in the support groups I run or the educational programs where it's like people are like, well, I have RA and I have OA. Look, I have osteoarthritis in certain joints too. Or in my case, I do, or other people are like, I have fibromyalgia and RA or long COVID or POTS. And sometimes it is helpful to distinguish, right? Because you're like, well, if I know that I have X tool in my toolbox that works for this condition, I want to use it. But other times it's like you could just go in circles all day and it doesn't really matter what's causing what sometimes. So I'm sure people listening are going to want to know more about, your journey with being a parent and your tips and tricks. Maybe we'll have to do like a separate episode on that because I want to also get to how you started. Yeah, you mentioned, you started volunteering with the Arthritis Foundation. Around what time did you start doing that? And I know because you already told me, but for the audience, and what have been some of your, how did you get started and what have been some of like your highlights?
Yeah. So, like I said, it was a couple years into my diagnosis, really, once I started kind of feeling good again, or better, I guess I should say. I started doing some Googling and found the Arthritis Foundation. And it just so happened that around the time that I was Googling, it must have been about February or March, and the Walk to Cure Arthritis was coming up. It was just, maybe 2 months away at the time. And so I was like, oh, this looks interesting and it's free to sign up and attend it. So why not? So I created a team. I roped in my family and a few of my close friends and said, all right, guys, on this day, we're going to go out here and we're going to go to the Walk to Cure Arthritis. And they were like, okay, I don't know what we're doing. We fundraised. We raised, I think over $1,000 that first year, just starting off and asking a few people for money. I didn't quite know what we were fundraising for. I just was like, okay, this seems like fun, right? So we went. And that day, I tell people all the time, I didn't just find the Arthritis Foundation that day, I found community. Again, I was a couple years into my diagnosis, but I had no idea how many people arthritis affected, specifically rheumatoid arthritis. I had no idea. I had no idea that kids could be affected by arthritis, which looking back makes sense. My rheumatologist had told me he thought that I'd been living with RA for a long time. It had just been undiagnosed as JRA. So that made sense looking back, but I had no idea, and I got to see the honorees go up on stage and tell their stories. And it was just so inspiring and so uplifting. And again, I found community that day. I found my people. So I went up to the staff person that was in charge and I introduced myself and I said, sign me up. Whatever you need help with, I'm here. I want to be involved. And that was it. That was when she of course immediately said, yes. What's your name? What's your number? Let's talk.
Yeah, now that you're in the behind the scenes, right? Those people where you're like, oh, they're enthusiastic. We got to get them involved. Yeah.
Exactly. It's like, let's sign you up right now. Yeah. So, I got involved that day and I joined the Walk to Cure Arthritis Committee and started doing that every year. And progressively just over the years got more and more involved. I really just love the community that I found. I loved meeting other people, hearing their stories, the similarities like I have with you, or even the differences, how some medication may work perfectly well for one person and just not at all for the next. It's really interesting how our bodies work and how our medication, the medications work and how our bodies respond to it. So I just got really, invested in it and loved the community I found. And so then I started volunteering at other events, the Bone Bash that we have here in Houston, the Jingle Bell runs that we do in December. And then I got the call to start getting involved at the national level and serving on different committees, like the DEI committee that I currently serve on. I just completed serving on the National Walk Committee, just being involved in different areas and meeting other people and being able to kind of be as we say, a champion of yes and somebody that's up there able to tell their story, but also able to give a patient perspective to the Arthritis Foundation, which I think is really important. Like I said, I didn't know what I was fundraising for. Now I know. But having that patient perspective for organizations like the Arthritis Foundation is so important because that's how they know what they're supposed to be focused on and what resources their people need, right? So yeah, that's kind of the shortest story I think I can of how I got involved with the Arthritis Foundation and some of the work that we've done.
No, I think that's great. I felt I had a similar experience in terms of not really knowing like the Walk for Arthritis or Jingle Bell Run. I thought they were really cute and fun ideas, but I didn't understand until I started volunteering behind the scenes. Just for anyone listening, if you've never been involved in a nonprofit before, you might wonder, well, wait, they have nonprofits. They're run like their business in many ways, right? But all the profit, instead of going to like the CEO or the employees, the profit is reinvested into the organization and into the mission. Obviously, usually nonprofits are mission driven, usually for good. And so in this case, you might think, well, wait, don't they get all these huge donations from large corporations and stuff? And don't they have staff? Yes, but almost every nonprofit that I've ever been part of, whether it was one of my first jobs out of college was a 3-person tiny nonprofit organization in Seattle. And then there's huge ones like or not even, Arthritis Foundation isn't even as big as some other ones, but they all need help. Long story short, the most long-winded way of saying this. Yes, they have donations. Yes, they have staff, but they utilize volunteers because there's always more work to be done.
Mhm.
It's 2025. We've put people on the moon, and the majority of Americans still don't understand that arthritis can happen to kids, and that,
Mhm.
that it's inflammatory arthritis is a full system, full bod condition. And so, one of the things that people ask me, because I actually got started in terms of deep involvement with the local camps, we have a family camp
Mhm.
here in Washington State for the whole family of children with juvenile rheumatic diseases, whether that's juvenile idiopathic arthritis or other similar conditions. And it's start with what I would usually just say, start with what you're just interested in, right? Are you interested
Mhm.
in walks and runs or cycling, or are you, there's all events for those, or are you interested in, support groups, or are you interested in like large galas, like the Bone Bash?
Yeah.
You don't have to do everything at once. Are you interested in legislative advocacy? That's what I would say. But what would you say to somebody who maybe doesn't even know where to start?
I agree with you. Find something that kind of resonates with you that you would like to get involved with. For some people, I know some people who are like, I will create a team and I will fundraise and I will donate, but I'm not going to be in charge of an event or be. So for some people, it's really just being an advocate and a spokesperson. The advocacy that you just mentioned, that's another one that's so important that is not super time consuming. I don't think people realize it's not super time consuming, but it's so important because those are the people that are sharing their stories with legislators that are making real impact on things like, insurance and approvals and things like we've kind of discussed a little bit. The STEP Act, for example, if you have not heard of that, please go Google it. It's legal in many states in the United States and it impacts people every single day because they're not able to get access to the medication they need. So, like you said, finding something that you're passionate about, whether it be advocacy, whether it be fun events or galas or golf tournaments or cycling, there's kind of something for everybody, really, just kind of see where you fit in.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm going to for sure put links in the show notes so that people can click on them and find events in your area. And you made a good point talking about you started local with your local like Texas, area groups or Texas area like initiatives. I know Texas is really big compared to Washington State. We have two walks to walk to cure arthritis and one jingle bell run. I guess probably across Texas, there's probably multiples. But there's also a national level as well, but, usually more what did you call it? It's usually easier to get started at the local level. And, I have friends I've made through the camps, starting with the kids camps, and then, first meeting people there and then meeting people through the walks and the Jingle Bell Run, that now, one of them, for example, Sarah Dillingham, she's been on the podcast. She created her own compression glove company, and it's been amazing to see it. I met her 10 years ago at a Jingle Bell Run, and now she's running a company that's helping people with make she wanted to make visually appealing compression gloves in like pretty
Hmm.
colors and pretty comfortable styles because she found the ones that were on off the shelf just not, cute enough to wear with her outfits. And I
Yeah.
thought it's been amazing to see that you just meet people who are doing such interesting things and you can, yeah, make what do I call them? Roommates. Like a friend made this like thing, RHUM mates or amino buddies. Yeah. Has there been anything that has surprised you when you've become involved or in a good way or a bad way, I guess? It's kind of like an open-ended.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. Sorry, things that have surprised me.
Just off the top of my that was just off the top of my
Yeah.
head.
I mean, I honestly, again, going back to it, one of the biggest surprises was just how many people it affects, and being able to see and hear other people's stories and just how it impacts their life. But another big surprise, something that uh, thankfully, knock on wood, doesn't affect me yet or now, are some of the comorbidities and the other diseases that can affect you. I know for me, we test for lupus all the time just to make sure that I don't have a secondary diagnosis, but that's something that, it's more common than I think people realize. Something else about my disease, I guess, that is surprising to a lot of people and something that I didn't even really know that much about or hadn't experienced, I guess, was just, as you said, it can affect the whole body. And for me, again, I talked about my early diagnosis and the joints and areas of the body that it was affecting. Well, over the last few years, when I flare, it's now my eyes and my lungs that are flaring as opposed to, my hands and wrists or knees. So, again, just the effects that this disease can have on your body, it's shocking to hear if you've never heard that before, but also experiencing it and realizing, oh my goodness, this is my RA. The first time that I had the lung inflammation, I didn't know if I was having a heart attack. I didn't know what was wrong with me. And, I went to the ER on the recommendation of a rheumatologist. It was probably 3 or 4 times just to be sure. And every time they checked everything and nothing came back positive. Everything was fine. And it was lung inflammation. I was going to say just lung inflammation, but it was lung
No,
inflammation
it's not. Yeah.
that was
That's
causing it.
not good.
Yeah, no, there's no just about it. It was awful.
Your
But
lungs are very important. But
yeah.
no, it's so true. I mean, I don't even think that was in my textbook in occupational therapy school. Like it was all about the joints and everything. But I mean, I know it's in the textbooks for physicians, like doctors, to make sure that you look at the lungs and the heart. And that's why the life expectancy of people with rheumatoid arthritis, if it's not controlled, that's a huge caveat because it is controlled in the majority of people now with the current medications. But if it's not controlled, our life expectancy is reduced compared to people without RA. That's why, because of that inflammation that can reach the lungs and heart and cause other issues there. So you're so right. It's important to, it's such an irony that a lot of people think it's quote unquote just arthritis or just
Right.
joint pain when it's so much more. So it's similar with Sjogren's. I know Sjogren's disease has a similar thing. Everyone thinks it's just dry eyes and dry mouth, but it's a systemic disease as well. So I've been learning a lot about that lately. I want to ask really quickly before we get to the rapid fire questions, what are some of the things you mentioned? We both kind of, you mentioned mental health earlier, and then I went on a little bit of a ramble about my mental health journey as well with like wayward optimism, which then came crashing down when I actually realized that this is an up and down disease and not just I'm just going to be on one medicine the rest of my life and one treatment plan. That's what I didn't say is that I kind of crashed at that point and then actually then accepted it. But what are some of the things that have helped you cope with these ups and downs? Whether that's it doesn't have to be like something super specific. Like it could be a book or something that's or therapy or or it could be friends, family, distractions, whatever helps you cope. It would be awesome to hear.
Yeah, I think the number one thing has been my family and my friends, my my tribe, my rocks, all the different ways that I can refer to them, but they really have been, from day one. Again, I was a young adult, so I was an adult, but I was like you were in college and still young and didn't understand or know everything. So, my parents would go with me to those doctor's appointments, when I first was diagnosed, and then the medication would kind of take me out to the point where I couldn't really drive. So they would just drive me. It was like I had JA, I guess you could say.
No, it's similar.
Yeah.
Super similar. Yeah.
Yeah. So, my friends and family were a big part of it. But then, like I said, with, once I found the Arthritis Foundation too, I really attribute that to being, I was already feeling better and, mentally was in a better place when I found the Arthritis Foundation. But I think it really just improved, tenfold after I found the Arthritis Foundation, because having that community, that other tribe, I guess you could say, of people, people that you can be in a room, you can have a conversation, and you don't have to explain why you're in pain, or you don't have to over explain, medications or treatments or different things. Everybody just kind of understands, oh yeah, methotrexate, oh yeah, Remicade, Rinvoq, whatever, they know the terms, they know the words, they understand what a flare is, so just being in a community of people that know exactly what you're going through and are just there to listen and offer support. That's one thing that I really think made a difference for me as well.
Yeah, 100%. It's so isolating, especially I feel like there used to be this kind of donut hole where there's a lot of services for people that are kids, and understandably so, because it's really a devastating disease on the growing body. And then there's a lot of services for people on like the elderly end of the spectrum, but like kind of young adults and adults were a little bit missed. And now I think that there's a lot more, there's Arthritis Foundation has not only they have the adult connecting, or groups, and also what am I forgetting the word? The conference of there's a Juvenile Arthritis National Conference every year. And then there's also like adult, oriented events like the Pathways Conference. That's the word I was looking for. And I was like, what's the word for the thing we did 1 month ago? Brain fog. And yeah, I think, there's no substitute for somebody who just gets it without having to explain. So I love that. I'm glad to hear you've had such good support. You have your arthritis family, and then you have your family, your maybe biological family, or your current family that with your kids and everything like that. So I think that's awesome. And so for the, to move into the rapid fire, I joked rapid fire, but these could be a whole episode. Each one of these could be a whole episode, which is, what are some of your best words of wisdom? You've already shared so much, but for somebody who's listening, who's brand new diagnosed in that kind of deer in the headlights stage, what would you say to them?
You called this rapid fire, and I could say so much to them, but I narrowed it down to 2 things. Number 1, find a good doctor. If you're not happy with the answers that you're getting or the treatment you're receiving, you have to advocate for yourself, and you cannot be afraid to get a second opinion. It might feel awkward. It might be uncomfortable. Trust me, the doctors, it doesn't matter to them as much as we build it up in our heads. Get that second opinion. Ask the right questions if you want to stay with that doctor. Make sure that you're heard and advocate for yourself. Number 2 is find a community. Again, I talked about my community. The Arthritis Foundation does have in-person and virtual support groups in all over the country. There's also Facebook groups out there that you can join. Just go to Facebook and just search for, your disease, and you're going to find groups. And then, if you don't want to do one of those things, lean on family and friends. You've got to find a community, because you cannot, go through this alone. It's too hard. And it's just not necessary. There's things out there that you can have for support.
100%. And I know on social media, I'm very active on social media, and it can be so easy to feel like everyone else has it figured out, and everyone's like an arthritis influencer, and they're all, and know that no one's life with this is perfect. And it's so validating to meet other people. And you find that sometimes one part of your life is going really well, but one part of your life isn't going well, and vice versa. And so it's just, you just cannot have perspective unless, in my experience, unless you are actually interacting with other people. Because too often your brain just gets a distorted filter, Yeah. So do you have a favorite quote, or maybe more than one quote, or inspirational saying for tough days?
Yeah. It's actually a lyrics, I should say, from John Mayer's song. He has a song called Emoji of a Wave. And the song, or the lyrics are, it's just a wave, and I know that when it comes, I'll just hold on until it's gone. This album came out in 2017, which was the year after my daughter was born, when I was at my peak pain, in probably the worst condition I've ever been in. And it's about a relationship, but to me, it was, again, a wave. When you think of a flare, flares come, it's awful, you hold on, you deal with it, and then it's gone, right? So it's just a reminder that, this too shall pass. And I'm just going to be strong and get through this until it's over.
I love that. That's often, I haven't heard that lyric because by law, as a Taylor Swift fan, I cannot listen to John Mayer. No, I'm just kidding. I love everyone.
I know. I'm also a Swiftie. And when people find out that I'm also a John Mayer fan, they're like, how could you? I'm like, I'm so sorry.
No, she did say during the Airs tour, when she sang a song that's allegedly about him, she was like, we're all adults now. This was in the past. We need to move on. Forgiveness is a gift to give yourself.
Yes. John Mayer didn't get a 10-minute version, so I think we're okay.
He's okay. He's okay. And on a more serious note, when I learned acceptance and commitment therapy, which has been the most helpful approach for me, and what I teach a lot in my support program, it's the analogy they often use for intense or uncomfortable emotions is like a wave. And it's a great analogy for many things. So one of the things is they say is, I used to feel like I would try to beat back the waves that were uncomfortable. And I would just try to, I don't want this wave. I want the happy wave. I'm going to fight it, and then realize no matter how much you fight it, it's just still gonna crest and just go. And if you just hold on, like
Mhm.
you're saying, hold on until it's gone, you're able to, they call it emotion surfing in ACT. Maybe they call it something else in different forms of therapy. But I always think I think of that like when I go to the ocean, as I live on the Pacific Northwest. So I like to
Mhm.
look at the waves and kind of imagine, yeah, there's just those are like the waves, the good waves and the
Yeah.
bad ones. So yeah, I love
And
it.
it's kind of become a thing for me. I have the lyric tattooed on my foot because, like sometimes when I would sit in bed, like that was just as much as I could do. I would sit kind of, crisscross applesauce and and so it was kind of, I would see my tattoo there on my foot and I'm like, you know what? It's just a wave. We have art in our home that's waves and pictures of actual beaches with actual waves that we've taken when we traveled. So it's really become a thing, but and I think it's, again, no matter what you're going through, whether it's a flare, whether it's some sort of depression or you're mourning the loss of something or someone, it's all, it comes in waves. And like you're saying, so that one's one that definitely sticks with me and forever because I got it ached on my foot. So
I love it. I love that. Yeah, I try to embrace the idea of being one of those really relaxed. And I'm laughing because I'm so not there, but it's okay. Those sea turtles in Hawaii, and if you
Mhm.
watch, they like to be closer to the shore. That's where so it's easier for them to get the food, but they don't tend to go on the wave like the big huge waves. But if you watch for a while, they'll kind of like sometimes they'll just be in a way, but they're just kind of like, so I was always thinking if I was going to get a tattoo, I get like one of the little turtles in the wave too. So anyway,
Yeah.
you're inspiring me, but I don't know if I could commit to a tattoo. I don't know. I'm too indecisive because I decided I didn't like it. But
Yeah.
that's me. Do you have
Yeah.
a favorite arthritis gadget or tool in your toolbox?
Oh, well, I love cooking for my family. I always feel like such a, I don't know, it's so silly, but I feel like such a productive mom when I actually get a meal on the table at dinner time and we're not eating
100%.
leftovers or ordering or something like that. So anything for the kitchen, jar openers, I have so many arthritis foundation jar openers all over the kitchen. Different, yeah, different tools that just make all of the kitchen, the cooking stuff more simple. Knives, like I try to get really light knives that aren't so heavy. My husband, he's always like, "You're not using the proper knife." I'm like, "But this is the knife I can control." So so using the right, using knives or even like different utensils for stirring or whisking or stuff like that. The ones that are really light and easier to hold on to, stuff like that. And pots and pans that aren't too heavy. Anything kitchen related, I'm always looking for the next best thing.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, 100%. My husband's
Yeah.
like, "Are we a store of arthritis goods?" Like, so when is it a collection and when is it an obsession? Who knows?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
gotta say. So I support you in that. I will enable all
Thank
of
you.
your purchases.
Thanks.
Yay. Well, and this is totally just one of my favorite questions to talk about. It has nothing to do with arthritis, but do you have a favorite book or movie or show you've been consuming recently?
So I just started the book called, and you might be interested in it because of your son, The Anxious Generation. My daughter's been begging for a cell phone for a while now, and I've been holding strong and not getting her one. But I've heard this book will reinforce me in my stance of not letting her have a smartphone yet. So just started reading that, but also I've read just good things about from the parent side, but also how it might help me. So I'm reading
Oh,
that.
yeah.
But also, I just watched the last season of You that just came out on Netflix. I'm a fan of true crime, and they have this twist at the end that I think was just like a nod to true crime fanatics. I'm not going to give any spoilers away, but yeah, but so the last season of You on Netflix, I just watched that. It actually just came out and I finished it in 2 days.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I can't do anything that's actually gory, but I'm watching The Residence right now, which is very much kind of like an only murders in the building type
Hmm.
show where it's really not. It's yes, it's about a murder mystery, but it's just mostly about all the funny characters around
It's
it.
more silly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's silly. Yeah, yeah.
Uh-huh.
So that's but I know that the actor was it Penn Badgley?
Penn Badgley. Yeah.
He's a cutie on
Yeah.
I've seen all the little promo for it, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I might want to just watch his face. I'll just
Yeah.
watch. And yeah, I love it. Thank you for those recs. And then, oh, just a little philosophical question. Yeah, well, back to arthritis. What does it mean to you to live a good life and thrive with the rheumatoid arthritis?
Well, I would love to live in a world where arthritis, people with arthritis could live a life without limits. But until then, just living a life that, I'm proud of. I recently heard a beautiful quote from a fellow arthritis warrior. She said, arthritis may have shaped my body, but it will not shape my spirit. And I just felt that so deeply. And she's so right, just living a life that I'm proud of, doing the things that I want to do, and not letting this disease, while it may have shaped my body, not letting it hold me back, mentally and with what I want to do in my life and in the world.
That's beautiful. I want to know who said that so I can give them credit for it because I'm gonna add that to my list of inspirational sayings.
Yeah,
And,
well, her
yeah,
I
who
can
is
I can
it?
tell her name is Jasmine Singh, and she actually
Oh,
she was our honoree here locally for the Houston Walk to Cure Arthritis, and she said that during her speech. She actually wrote a great book too. She's an author, and she wrote a book
that name is
about,
familiar.
yeah,
Yeah,
I would need to look up the name for it, but she wrote a book
Saved
about
by
how
Depeche Mode.
Saved by Depeche Mode. That's it.
Yeah, I just found it. Sorry, that's why I was having my computer queued up while I'm doing these stuff and put it in the show notes. I'll definitely put her in the
Yeah.
show notes. I love that. And on a similar note, I was listening to a podcast right before we started recording today, actually. It was an interview between Tig Notaro, who is a comedian, and Monica Lewinsky. You know who she is.
Hmm.
And I've been really following her, Monica Lewinsky's new podcast and really loving it. And it's called Reclaiming. And, in her case, she is reclaiming her identity as somebody whose name was completely, dragged through the mud, and we don't need to rehash all that. But what I really loved is Tig is somebody who has survived a whole bunch of tough things happening to her at once, including like breast cancer and like a severe case of C. diff. And then her mom died and her girlfriend broke up with her, like all in the course of like 2 weeks or something really wild. And the point of this, relating to this, it might have shaped my body, but will not shape my spirit. She was talking in the podcast in a very not like a toxic positivity way, but she was talking about how these things all happening to her. In her case, it was 2012. It basically it shook her out of the life in autopilot and forced her to say, what is important to me? Wait, I am mortal. Like I might, or I'm not might, we're all gonna die someday. Right. And I think, and that was the greatest gift it gave her, she was saying in this podcast episode, which I will link to in the show notes. And I feel like that really resonated with me. I don't know if you feel the same with RA, that it's not as immediately life threatening, right, as breast cancer, but it did. I don't think I would have had as great a sense in my 20s of I am mortal. Like my body is not, and you used the word invincible earlier. I'm not invincible. Yeah, maybe blindly optimistic, but it was starting to sink in. Like after the diagnosis, some part of me was like, okay, I'm actually not invincible. And that kind of
Yeah.
gives you perspective, right?
It does, and I recently you were at the same convention I was at, the same conference I was at, and in there I talked about turning my pain into purpose, and that is really truly how I feel about my RA diagnosis. Is something was just thrown in my lap that I'd never heard of, would never have expected, and was told that this is going to be my life forever. And so there's, I guess in my mind, there was two options. I can just be angry for the rest of my life, or I can try to do something about it and try and make a difference. And, for myself, for my family, and for others, for people, if I don't know. And one of the things that I truly, am so proud of in the time that I've been involved with the Arthritis Foundation, the one thing that I feel like the most proud of is just talking, not even, in a formal setting, but just talking to people that are newly diagnosed and listening to them and hearing, what they're dealing with, and just offering some perspective from, the 20 years down the road version of what they're dealing with, and that it is okay, and that it can be okay. And, just finding the right thing for you, and what's going to make a difference for you. But for me, that truly turning my pain into purpose really just made a difference for me.
Yeah, I love that. I resonate with that so much. And I think I'm imagining you studying for your communications degree as a college student. Little did you know at that time, pre-diagnosis, that your communication skills were going to be used, right, on such a big platform. I mean, you are a very, in my opinion, I have no authority to say this other than just my brain. But I think you're a really skilled communicator and a great storyteller. So I really appreciate, I met you in person at that Pathways conference. And I saw you get this really huge award from the Arthritis Foundation to recognize all of your amazing volunteer work. So I'm so grateful of you. I'm grateful for you. Speaking of communication, I could speak for taking the time to share your story today. And I'm sure others are going to want to maybe connect with you. Where can people find you online?
So I'm everywhere, but I do have a hard to spell first name and last name. So be sure to look at how Cheryl spelled it, I guess, in the show notes. But I'm on any social media platforms, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. You can look me up and find me there. And I'm always happy to connect, like I said, with people that are kind of in the same boat and just, if even if they just need somebody to vent to or to get an opinion from, I'm no doctor. I'm not giving any sort of formal advice or anything like that, but just from one warrior to another, I'm always happy to help as much as I can.
And there is a saying that I first learned at the rheumatology conference for providers, but it's that patients are the experts in their own care. And you really are, especially with a chronic condition, that you are the expert in the lifelong detective work of discovering what does work and what doesn't work in your body. And, and you're a team with your health providers, but you're an important member of that team. And so I appreciate all the work that you do. I think newly diagnosed patients are also my passion, really helping people in that early stage feel like they are not alone. And so I resonate with everything you said. I hope you guys all who are listening, find Christina with no H, Christina, and then Schaefer if you're just like typing on your computer, like I want to find her right now. And make sure to go to the show notes. If you're listening to this on audio, I always like to remind people now that, I guess a lot of podcasts are going to video. I've been posting videos for a while of the conversations because I'm recording video anyway. So they're on the Arthritis Life YouTube channel. And you can also go to the show notes page to get a transcript. I want this to be accessible. So I know for some people, either who can't watch the video or can't hear the audio, you can get access to the transcript that way. So thanks so much. And I want to, if you had time, I really appreciate you with the 5-month-old. I think I was not coherent enough to do a podcast at that point, but I would love to do a different one about kind of the parenting tips, and especially with small babies. It's such a physical job with the fingers and the hands. And so.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot to it. And definitely, I'll love to have that conversation with you.
Yay. All right. Well, bye-bye for now. Thanks
Bye.
again.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. This podcast is supported by Room to Thrive, an educational program I created to help empower you to live life to the fullest with rheumatic disease. In the program, you're going to learn evidence-based tools for managing all the ways rheumatic disease affects your life. And my goal is to help you go from overwhelmed to confident, supported, and connected in a matter of weeks. You can go through the pre-recorded modules on your own in the self-paced course, or you can take the course along with a robust support group of new arthritis friends to support you and cheerlead you along the way. Learn more in the link in my show notes, or you can always go to www.myarthritislife.net. And if you like this podcast, I'd be so honored if you took the time to rate and review it. I also encourage you to share it with anyone you know who might benefit from it. I also want to remind you that you can find full transcripts, videos, and detailed show notes with hyperlinks for each episode on the Arthritis Life website, plus full episode videos on the Arthritis Life YouTube channel. If you have any ideas for content for future episodes, or you want to share your story on the podcast, please send me, Cheryl, an email at info@myarthritislife.net. I can't wait to hear from you, and thanks so much again for your time.